Hello and welcome to today's session. I hope you're all doing, as always, amazingly well from whichever part of the world you are watching or listening. Today, I wanted to talk about a myth we have within the wellness industry, and that is that wellness takes long in order to see our return on investment. So, wellness requires a longer incubation period than, for example, our fellow F&B or rooms. And this is something I have said very often, that wellness requires a longer incubation period. And when I was researching for my book, The Wellness Asset, I interviewed some incredibly great minds, and I continue to interview some incredibly great minds. And these were hoteliers who believed in wellness, also kind of found themselves in this catch-22 situation where they're deeply aware that some wellness facilities do require high capital outlay, and you don't see the result of you don't see that return on investment until probably beyond 7 to 10 years. Now, it doesn't mean that all wellness offerings can have a swift return. That's not what I'm trying to say today. But I do want to say is that it's actually a myth that you can't have a swift return on investment when it comes to wellness. And I have actually seen results proving that wellness does not always have a long incubation period. In my book, The Wellness Asset, I make reference to two case studies. One of Aberdeen Shan. He is a boutique hotel owner. He has a portfolio of boutique hotels around the world, predominantly in India and Sri Lanka. And in the case study that I share in my book is about his property in Mumbai and a boutique property. And this is a family owned asset and also a family operated asset. And he wanted to add wellness into his hotel. But like any hotel, any business you're doing, you require stakeholder buy in. You also have to manage the conflicting, kind of competing areas where each stakeholder believes that their money would be better spent. So he bet on wellness. He also was betting on wellness in a time where cash was not abundantly available, just shortly after the pandemic. So his interpretation of actually creating and doing wellness was using this multi-purpose room that they had in this small boutique property in the middle of Mumbai. And he converted that into mind body activities, into healthy eating workshops, into co working space areas. And then what he did was implement wellness in small little doses, right from the crockery used, copper cups that promote well-being through the water when you actually serve it through copper cups. I remember him mentioning that, and all the other little elements he did in order to encourage that community, in order to encourage connection, in order to encourage relaxation, in order to encourage just plain old hydration. That's all related to wellness in some shape, way, or form. And he managed to get a very swift proof of concept whether his ideal guest, the guest they wanted to target, was actually interested in wellness. And once he got that proof of concept that his guests actually did care about wellness, once he was actually looking at his value ecosystem, what does he want to offer? How does he want to offer? And who does he want to offer? That is when he managed to get that stakeholder buy in by actually implementing something so small, that's something that has a huge impact, and that required minimal investment. So, that, for example, is a case study, a real life example of doing wellness in its most basic and really, really raw and authentic form, and delivering the transformation to our guests and getting your stakeholder buy in. And that return on investment, that literally happened in a space of 6 to 8 months. He got his proof of concept. And when he got his proof of concept, he actually understood what his avatar, his ideal guest wanted. And he showed his stakeholders what wellness was doing. He was then able to take it a step further once he had actually got the revenue in at first. And another example I also share in my book, The Wellness Asset, is about Yagna Pratap. And he's talking about, obviously, he manages, at that point, he was managing a large portfolio of hotels. And this is an investment firm. And there were also asset operators and asset owners, depending on what kind of asset. And one of the particular hotels at that point had 800 rooms. Now, they were at this critical point where should they add wellness or shouldn't they add wellness? Now, it was clear to Yagna that it was very, very important to add wellness, but he was all too familiar what happens when you add a full-blown spa facility into a luxury hotel. Sometimes you never recoup the original cost of build when you're already getting onto 7 or 8 years when you have to actually refurbish parts of the facility. Clearly, that wouldn't work in this particular property. So instead, what they opted for was a very small facility which had only 6 treatment rooms. And within the first few months of opening that facility, they were operating at 100% occupancy. They had waiting lists. He actually set himself, the entire investment fund, and the hotel operator up for success. It was clear that wellness was important. But instead of implementing for 800 rooms, 25 or 35 or 40 treatment rooms and a full-blown facility, he instead opted for 6. And since day one, they had a waiting list. He created that supply-demand tension. He created the proof of concept he needed and also generated revenue along the way in order to reinvest for a much larger facility. So what I wanted to say today is it's a myth that you do not see a swift return on investment when it comes to wellness. You can throw wellness's entire kitchen sink into the mix and not see investment in 10 to 12 or even 15 years' time. And that is how we have traditionally, as wellness professionals, done wellness. We want it all. Otherwise, it's impossible to do wellness properly. But sometimes just having a room available and offering different services, even if you do not have staff on your actual payroll, instead you're collaborating with local yoga teachers, yoga teachers, Pilates teachers, fitness instructors, therapists. Instead, you have them as a freelance basis. You don't have any fixed cost. You have a variable cost, and you're using a space in order to test out your concept. And once you get sufficient demand, or rather said, once you build sufficient demand, then you're able to actually make that full-blown investment. So we don't always have to go the entire 9 yards. We can just implement a small part, create that demand, actually learn what is working, what isn't working. How can we serve our guests better? How can we address their well-being needs? That is realistic for us and commercially sustainable for us. And once we get that proof of concept, once we've actually generated that money in advance, we're then able to actually implement probably a more sophisticated and detailed wellness offering. So today, what I wanted to do is just mention that, I've always been the person who said that wellness requires a longer incubation period. When I have even clients and they come to me and they want to build a wellness retreat, I always mention that takes longer than perhaps a more traditional hospitality product offering. But I have also been taught quite the contrary, that you can get a very swift return on investment with wellness. You can get your proof of concept quick, and you can also make the cash in advance in order to invest for that larger wellness concept or the more sophisticated wellness concept you want to implement further down the line. And the benefits of actually starting small, getting your proof of concept, and then jumping into a deeper and a stronger investment is that you get stakeholder buy in of your fellow hoteliers, of your owners, of your guests, and also your team and your community. And that's actually a smart way of doing wellness. So I think sometimes it's good to challenge these kind of age old myths we have that you do not see a swift return on investment with wellness. You normally, it's not like other departments where you see weeks on wait lists, which I also mentioned in my book, The Wellness Asset. So it's good to see that not always does wellness take long in order to see your return on investment. You can actually get a swift return on investment. And I actually encourage wellness and hospitality leaders to be brave enough to actually start incredibly small, incredibly simple. We can actually make it risk free, test the concept, get the proof of concept. And if we can actually get revenue beforehand, even better. And then once we are clear what our ideal guest actually wants, what we are capable of delivering in a commercially sustainable way, then we are able to actually implement wellness, go that step further. So, on that very positive note, I wish you all a beautiful day ahead now. Take care.